Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Wordy Pair Podcast. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I exist in a space known as Justin.
The Justin space. And today we are going to be talking about the Lensman series, which I'm kind of reading bit by bit. And it is not what I expected, but it's still good.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten into it, even though I was the one that forwarded it to you. But
it's one of those weird cases where you're like, oh, check this out, Lensman series. I'm like, ooh, Lensman series. There was a so. Have you watched any of the show or the movies, like the animated stuff?
I think I saw one of them. I think there was like an OVA or something that I watched.
Okay,
and
because that's probably like the one place that anyone listening to this might have heard the name Lensman, because like the books themselves are not like, they're not like big sellers today, and Doc E. Smith is long dead, and so like just the fact that there's a collection of these 6 books, for like $3 on Amazon in Kindle form, does not mean that it's like selling a lot of copies of them, and does not mean that there's some kind of like cultural zeitgeist behind Lensman. But like if you have heard of the Lensman at any time in the last 20 or 30 years, you probably were hearing about the anime.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know they were books. I came across one of the books at a used bookstore completely by accident, and I was like, wait a minute, this can't be related to the Lensman anime? And then I looked it up on my phone, and I was like, oh, it is, okay.
Yeah, it totally is. And because it was based on like a 1980s anime, I had a really prejudiced thought of what it was going to be when I picked up the books. I'm like, I know it's probably not going to be quite as anime as the anime would be, but at the same time, it's probably going to be similar in a lot of ways. And I was really surprised by what these books are, considering that they were turned into an anime that... So I've heard of the anime, but I've never seen it, right? And so I was like, Lensman, huh? That sounds like Power Rangers or something like that. And so that was the kind of the perspective I had going into these books, and I was wrong.
Yeah, how did you describe it to me again? I remember it being quite interesting.
It's well, you mean describe the story or describe the lens?
Well, no, you mentioned it to me after reading one of them, and you were like, yeah, it's kind of like a space cop drama. Or
yeah,
something.
It is. Well, the cop drama is not quite right, because the cop drama is usually more procedural. This is more like a space cop adventure. But yeah, the Lensmen are an outgrowth of like the interplanetary police system that the Earth Federation creates after they start to colonize multiple planets in the solar system, which is not... It's not quite like usually these like the Power Rangers or like these, colorfully suited characters that I was kind of visualizing. They kind of operate in like they're not officially sanctioned in any way, right?
Yeah.
and so I was kind of thinking about that, like it from that perspective, that they were going to be like superheroes, and the lenses were going to give them superpowers. And no. It's actually way weirder than that, and kind of cool because of that.
From what little I read of the one book I picked up that was probably the 3rd or 4th book,
Yeah.
It kind of like awakens psychic or special powers within people, but it's different depending on...
It's almost entirely psychic powers as far as I've gotten. I've read the first 2 books, which are prequels to the official Lensman series, and I've read about a quarter of the first Lensman book. So I'm like, out of the 6, I think the collection is like 6 books. I'm a little under halfway through, and so the way that it's really weird because the way that the Lensman series actually started was not with Lensman. It started with a series of pulp, or with a series of pulp stories that were published serially by one of the old pulp magazines back in the late 1930s, actually, or early 1930s, 1934, I believe. And it was very funny because the super pack that you sent me a link to that I bought on Amazon tells you that Triplanetary, which is the first book, which was based on these pulps, was written in 1934. And in fact, those pulps were written and published in 1934, I believe. But here's the thing. What they don't tell you is that Doc Smith in 1948 added to them significantly to link them into the Lensman series that he had already written.
Oh.
And so I was sitting there reading this book thinking, all right, this is written in 1934. And then they start talking about World War II and atomic bombs. And I'm like, how?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I was like, how prescient was this guy? And so...
Yes. I remember you calling me and telling me that. We had a good laugh about it.
I was so confused because I was like, 1934? All right, they're talking about World War I. That's kind of interesting. Now they're talking about World War II, America against Germany, and atomic bombs. Okay, that's a little strange.
What if that's a lie? What if it's a lie that he added more to that story in 1948 and he actually did see the future?
So, I mean, that would be awesome, but at the same time I did go back and I checked the archives of that pulp magazine, and in fact, I found the original published versions of the 4-part story that was Triplanetary pre-Lensman. So, unfortunately, I can debunk this fun and fanciful possibility.
For now.
No, but it's actually really interesting because the Lensman series is not about, like, on the surface, it's about this kind of police adventure kind of thing, where they're trying to stop, drug runners or smugglers or robbers, basically. So at the start of the first Lensman book, they talk about how as mankind expanded to the stars, and as mankind began to interact with all kinds of different alien species across the galaxy, crime became more and more difficult to deal with. In the sense that, like, if you have a faster-than-light drive, you can commit a crime and you can be so far away so quickly that no one has jurisdiction to bring you in. And so it made it so that it was this, like there was this big expansion of crime and a very difficult sense of how to actually enforce laws, across the galaxy. And so the Lensmen are they're like the
sheriff putting together a posse.
It's more than that. They're space untouchables is closer to accurate. Because one of the things that the lens does is that you cannot possibly use a lens if you are corruptible in any way. And so it's one of those things where, for the purposes of fiction, they take internal corruption inside the Lensman off the table early on. And they're like, if you're possibly corruptible, you can't possibly be compatible with a lens. It just can't happen. And so, like, this is actually brought up in the second book, which I believe was written in 1950 after the rest of the Lensman series. But the second book is called First Lensman, and it's a prequel to the Lensman series. And it kind of talks about the first time that mankind got their hands on a lens. And it's really interesting because the people using these lenses are using them to solve crimes, to stop robbers and pirates and stuff like that across the galaxy. But really what they are is they're pawns in this bigger fight. And this bigger fight gets referred to only occasionally throughout the books. But it's basically a mortal feud between they're called the Arisians, or the good guys. The Arisians are the ones that have like this massive mental capabilities, and they use their thought more than they worry about like the material world kind of thing. It's very weird because they are supposedly super strong, but at the same time there's this opposing group whose name I'm blanking on, but they are also like so incredibly powerful in thought that they're the only thing that could possibly threaten the Arisians. And yet at the same time, the bad guys are, more materialistic, and so they actually do try to conquer stars and stuff like that. Whereas the Arisians are kind of content to just stay on their own planet and think their time away, kind of thing. It's a really neat idea because for all the action and gunslinging and cowboy kind of stuff going on, really the main fight is actually a question of intellects rather than brawn. So there's kind of that kind of theme hangs in the background throughout the books, even though you're just listening or just reading about people, solving crimes here and there.
Okay, well, it sounds a lot like, I think like a cop adventure sounds more interesting than a cop drama to begin with.
Well, if to some people, sure.
Yeah. Well, to me, people specifically.
Yeah, sure.
But it seems like, first off, it seems like I need to read these books. Second off, it seems like there's a lot of that. What's a good comparison? Is it kind of like almost like a Death Note Battle of Wits kind of thing going on anywhere? Or?
No, when they say mental power, they're almost referring to like a telepathic power. The bad guys can use their mental powers to command others, and so they create this massive like network of people that they've compromised. And the Eurasians have a lot of mental power that they could use, but they're also like preparing this massive mental defense to finally take out the bad guys, and they're using humanity's desire to solve crimes and use the lenses to kind of like breed toward the solution that they need to beat the bad guys whose names I really need to remember.
Ah, I see. Okay.
It's
so like a breeding program in which everyone is non-corruptible.
I mean, the people who eventually get lenses are non-corruptible, but like the people who are part of their plan are not necessarily all lensmen. It's only certain parts of those lines that, like, it's not like a dynasty kind of thing, but there are like a couple of like, genetic lines of humanity that are important to eventually mix them together to make things happen,
I think I understand. So it's not like a Tila thing from Ringworld where she was actually bred to be a lucky person.
No,
they're not like trying to just breed corruption away from humanity by giving them the lenses to play with.
It's that somehow by giving people lenses and helping to make people, better, they're helping mankind to. That's the thing, is that like the Eurasians have claimed throughout the earlier books that there's like some kind of plan, that they're like trying to build up to something that will allow them to beat the bad guys once and for. I'm looking up their name. Hold on a second. I can't keep saying the bad guys.
Yeah, no problem. The baddies.
The baddies. There's Arisia. Eddorians. Okay, there we go. So the bad guys are the
Eddorians. I almost messed up that joke. Did you hear that? Did you hear me almost mess up that joke? I almost said we love the Eddorians, and in my head I was like, I should say we adore the Eddorians, and I just go, I love the Eddorians.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear it. You did say adore, so it worked. Fortunately, no one else here is privy to your internal monologue.
No. I said it and then I caught myself. You must not have heard that. So.
I didn't hear it. No, I heard.
So it's there for everyone. Uh-huh. You'll hear it in editing.
I'll in post when I'm editing. Sure.
Just like crank it up right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's weird. It's like there's this like background plan, but it's not really the subject of most of the action in the stories. Because what the stories usually are is that there's some dude with a lens, and he's got some friends, and they're working together to stop some other bad guy. And the bad guy is usually under the control of the Eddorians, but he's not necessarily like they never face the Eddorians directly, if that makes sense. At least not so far. And so the lens, like, I was thinking that like the lens would give them superpowers or something, but it basically just allows them to like project their mental power more easily, and also it proves that they're incorruptible, which is a nice shortcut for any author. It's that like I have this thing, which means that I cannot possibly be corrupted.
And there you go, no questions asked.
Yeah.
No, that is a genuinely useful writing tool if you make a solid rule like that. But you got to stick with it. I mean, it's possible that there could be a fake lens somewhere down the line that the bad guys created.
Sure, I mean,
they use
like,
it to fool the good guys.
Smith has gone through most of these possibilities. He's like, there can be no such thing as a counterfeit lens. Any lensman can tell a lensman, not just on sight, but on like proximity, on thought.
Okay, so pretty strict.
The lens can't be stolen. It can't be used by anyone who it's not tuned for. Things like that. I mean, again, I'm only in like the first half of the first actual Lensman book. I've gone through the two prequels, Triplanetary and First Lensman, which were both written. Well, so Triplanetary is written partly before and partly after the Lensman series, and then First Lensman was written entirely after the Lensman series, and so now I'm just barely getting into like the first like original Lensman book, and so who knows what kind of changes are going to happen in the next 4 books, but like
the book so just far, opens all the lenses were corrupted.
All the lenses were always corrupted, and in fact, it's like some kind of horrible Plato's allegory of the cave or something like that. I don't know.
Or I guess the Last Jedi. I guess it could be.
I don't know, something like that. But yeah, they're fun actiony stories. And the lens people are not nearly like I was really expecting like colored suits and like martial arts. That's where I was going into this. And then like, oh, they're just cops.
Well, having seen the anime, they have like sci-fi-ish suits, but they're uniforms.
Yeah, I mean they certainly wear uniforms, and they say like silver and black are the colors of the lensmen, things like that. But yeah, they're fun, old school kind of just pulpy action adventure stories. Let's see, Triplanetary is and at the same time they're also like really, there's a lot of linguistic things that are funny to watch, to read in this story. Like for instance, nowadays, anytime that you like have a video on a thing, what do you call it? Like it's a TV blank.
Monitor?
Monitor is
screen?
There you go. Screen is the word I was looking for. The word screen, used in that sense, did not exist when these books were written. So instead, the word that Smith uses is plate. And he uses the word plate all over the place because, of course, it was, related to like photographic plates. But like screens, as things to like look at a feed on, didn't exist then as a word. But the word screen as a screen door did exist. And so all of the things that we would call shields nowadays are all called screens in the books. It's very funny to see these words that were used. It's like a kind of futurism in a sense, right? Like Doc Smith had no idea that this thing called television would come to be, and that people would have TV screens in every house eventually, and sometimes these screens would have colors, and some of them would be black and white. He had no idea, but he did know about like photo plates, and so like he's like, oh well, we'll just call these things that they're looking at video on plates. And then he's like, well, and then he had no idea that someone would come up with the idea of like a spaceship having shields and calling them shields. And so he's like, yeah, they're called screens. They screen out, offensive abilities of other ships. He has tractor beams, which, I mean, tractors are a thing that existed back then. But like, there's all kinds of funny words used that way, where it's like, oh, this word didn't get used that way until after he had already written all of these books. And that's kind of a fun linguistic treat to like look at this and see how people thought of these words before they became popular in big scale science fiction in the near future. After that, it's just one of those fun things to think about. You know, yeah. There's also a fun, what would you call it? Like I think Doc Smith didn't understand relativity, which is probably fine. Most people didn't understand general relativity back in the 1940s.
Yeah,
but you know, he basically the way that he handles faster than light travel is he says he removes all of the inertia from objects. That there's a drive that can do this, and it's a really weird idea because it still uses, what would you call it, like classical physics in a way. Like it's not pulling like it's not pulling some kind of quantum thing. And it's not really thinking about things from a relativistic perspective. It's just saying, yeah, if we get rid of the inertia from the mass and we have a drive that can produce this much, thrust, then, we'll go as fast as we can up to the point where, the drag in space is counteracted by the thrust. And so
I'll call it my inertia drive. Your inertia drive? No, inertia drive. It's you can hear the T. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to say that. No.
no one is going to realize that unless they hear you say it, because the word is spelled the same way. Yeah, it's neat because like they kind of describe it as like taking almost all of the inertia, but like from a relativistic perspective, speaking as a physicist, you would have to zero out the rest mass of the ship. Like it would, like the ship would have to become literally massless in the sense that we use that word for relativistic statements, and so it's really like I don't think it works, but I think that's okay, right? Like back then, even a person with a PhD in chemical engineering wasn't really expected to understand the space-time speed limit of the speed of light, because like other things that aren't electromagnetic waves, for instance, move at the speed of light, like gravity signals move at the speed of light. And I looked into this because I was curious about it, because I'm like, when did physics kind of quote unquote figure out that the speed of light was like an upper limit for everything and not just light? And it turns out that if you actually dig into the general relativistic equations that get you towards gravitational waves, the fact that the gravitational waves move at the speed of light actually falls out of those equations, which was surprising to me. It was something that I had to look up because I didn't do too much general relativity when I was in undergrad or grad school. So it is true that today people think that the fastest that things can move is the speed of light, but it wasn't true then. And so he has all these things like these ultra beams or like infra beams or whatever, and those all move faster than the speed of light. And he does make a lot of references to like the ether and how these things are like sub-ethereal, and so therefore they can move faster than light can move through the ether, kind of thing. It's all very
well. Ether they do or they don't,
Yeah. It's just neat to see all of this old school stuff that's not like limited by modern understandings of things. Like, yeah, well. it must have been like just nowadays, if you write something, you're like, well, the speed of light is the fastest things can go, and like back then it was like, no, maybe things go faster than that.
We left a sprinkle of inertia in the Lensman's drive. Let's see if they notice.
Well, it would be bad.
We've killed the Lensman. What have we done?
No. It's another fun thing is that like, this book is very slapdash about details, like technical details. Like nowadays in science fiction, there's always like, oh yeah, this ship has, a drive, this many drives that go this far, this fast. It has this kind of fuel capacity. It has this many guns of this type and this type and this type. There's always, in modern science fiction, there's always this like attention to like detail, to like kind of fill out what the ship is shaped like and how it's armed, and what kind of defensive abilities it has, and Doc Smith just doesn't really seem to care. Like,
I like that.
Reading it's kind of refreshing in a way, honestly. Like, reading Triplanetary, the image in my head that I got of their ships was a big ball with a bunch of guns on it.
That's funny.
and the best part is that reading First Lensman, that was actually confirmed, because they said that the low-tech ships were spherical, and that there was this new technology of making ships teardrop-shaped, which made them go faster through space in superluminal speeds. It's kind of a treat to read.
You see, because the teardrop shape gives it more of an illusion of speed, which fools the universe into letting them go faster.
No, it's the mechanical drag perspective. The perspective is that pushing a teardrop shape through, a thin vapor like interstellar space generates less drag force than pushing a sphere through.
Well, kick me in the luminiferous aether.
Right, exactly. It's clever, and it's super obsolete compared to what we are used to today, which makes it really refreshing and interesting to read. And it also helps to keep the pace fast, because again, these are action adventure stories, and so you don't want to stop and spend half an hour talking about the ship and describing it. It's just it's a big teardrop that goes through space and has a bunch of guns and screens and does stuff. And then there's I don't know, they have a bunch of the book I'm reading right now is that they have this new ship, and what it does is it basically uses tractor beams to create a tube, and then it pushes a big torpedo through the tube into the enemy ship. It's just it's just a big bomb. And he made up these goofy names for these chemicals that are being used as explosives and stuff. It's just fun, It doesn't worry too much about being what would you call it? It doesn't waste too much time trying to be hoity-toity or literary. It's just no, we're gonna have a fun space adventure, and people are gonna get into crazy adventures on different planets, and they're gonna meet aliens, and they're gonna use their lens, and the bad guys are gonna be chasing them, and it's just fun. It's just very fun. And there's no martial arts.
Sadly, but that's okay.
They all have ray guns.
They have ray guns and telepathy.
Yeah, well, the telepathy thing is kind of interesting. So what the lens does is it allows you to project the power of your mind more powerfully than you could otherwise, right? It's kind of like mental training wheels for humanity. Because the Arisians can already do this. They can throw out a burst of mind power that'll stun or kill someone. But they're basically delegating this to humanity, and they're trying to kind of bring humanity to a perspective where it has more powerful minds. But a lens, so in the book that I'm reading, one of the characters is I can kind of send out a general SOS for a few kilometers. Maybe 1,000 kilometers, someone might hear me in their head if I send this out, but much shorter than that probably. But if I'm trying to talk to another person who has a lens, it's much easier because we can kind of create a conduit between each other, and it's less lossy. So it gives them, yeah.
It's a police adventure where everyone's on the police band at all times.
Where all the police are, yeah. I mean, nobody else can hear the lensmen talking to each other.
They've got the space walkie-talkies.
Well, it's really weird because Doc Smith created all these different ideas for special rays to probe things. So there's spy rays and stuff like that allow people to send sensory questioning. They're always worried about some enemy having spy rays that's hitting their technology and learning what their technology is, kind of thing. And they're always worried about spy rays telling them, oh, there's people here and we need to go kill them. So there's a lot of ad hoc stuff, but you kind of get used to it after a while because it becomes so commonplace. At this point, I've read enough that it's oh yeah, they're hiding, but they're going to need something to block spy rays, or they're going to have to get really lucky. And yeah, they're oh yeah, we have this metallic system, we have these batteries that put up a field that prevents the spy rays from getting into it. There's no description of what these spy rays are, and there's no description of how the anti-spy rays prevent the spy rays from spy raying. But
they can be defeated by throwing some Duracells at them. Got it.
Something. Yeah, I don't know.
We're good. We got it. It's all set.
It's pretty funny because like another word that doesn't exist in apparently in Doc Smith's time was the word battery, as in like a Duracell battery, right? That doesn't exist. And so all of the quote unquote what we would call batteries in the story are called accumulators. And just just yesterday I was reading a part where they talked about a battery of accumulators. Meaning an array of accumulators. And it's like, oh, the word battery wasn't used that way then, so he used the word accumulator. But then he started to describe a battery of them. Because battery, in the terms of like an array of guns, for instance, was already a thing.
Yeah.
They're very they're very like interesting to read in that sense, that like you're getting all this weird linguistic, really old school linguistic stuff that you wouldn't have thought of. And Doc Smith has a really good vocabulary. And so he plays around with all these words, and he has all these big, long technical words for things. But at the same time, the stories are really fun, and they're just paced out like in this consistent action way that's just really entertaining.
Yeah, I do remember the few pages that I read of one before I was like, I need to tell Rudy about these.
Yeah.
It was a lot of good dialogue. The sentence structure was not unappealing. It was pretty fun to just... It was a good read. It was fun to read. Like, it didn't just feel like someone was throwing paragraphs at me.
I would say that the dialogue has a little bit of that, like... we've seen, like, those television shows where they, like, make fun of, like, a TV show... Or like a radio show from the 1940s where everybody has their pants hiked up to their chest and talks really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of dialogue that sounds like that, which is, especially in the really early stuff, like in the stuff that was written in 34, like Triplanetary, like the dialogue is really goofy sounding sometimes. But it gets things across. But like some of the, expressions that the characters use are so ancient that people just don't understand. Like I'm just like, what does this mean? Like, I guess I can kind of guess it from context clues, but like, no one uses this phrase anymore.
Well, unfortunately, I haven't read enough to where I can say much about it. But
ask questions.
All right. First question.
Okay.
Is everybody dapper?
No.
Because the way you were talking about it, I just had this image in my head of like clones of Archie Goodwin with lenses on their hands.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have that kind of 1940s, very like man about town kind of feel to them. I don't know how to describe it. They're the story is sexist in a way that no story would be written today.
Yeah.
like actually in First Lensman, which by the way was written in I believe 1950, and therefore is the last book written in the Lensman series, but it's the second book in the series as far as the series timeline goes. But like they're like, yeah, only men can be Lensman. There will be one female Lensman, and you'll know it when it happens, and that'll be it. And so like you would never see that these days. It's very like, it's just kind of like so funny because it's so blatant. Like the Arisian, like this creature that has massive mental powers, is like, there will only be ever one female Lensman, and well, it's not now, so don't worry about it. And there's a lot of in the early books. There's a lot of language like that about like how. So one of the things about the Eddorians is that Doc Smith talks about is how they have no male and female. Like they're literally more neuter than neuter can be, kind of thing. And it has no bearing on the story as far as I can tell, except that like. Then the Arisians like, only men can be Lensmen, and that's why we call them Lensmen and not Lens people. Or like Lensers or something, right? It's just really funny because you would never in a million, well, not, I guess a million years is too long of a period, but like you would never see that today where they're like, oh, there's this prestigious thing, and only men can be this prestigious thing. But everybody kind of has that feel to them, that 1940s or 1930s, 1940s feel to them. That like there's definitely not like a sense of like equality that gets pushed around in the story in any sense. It's very much a story about the best of the best being the best of the best, and not about like, oh well, we gotta bring up these people who like. There's a bunch of character traits that are required to be a Lensman. One of them is being incorruptible, but you also have to have like this massive drive to explore and like save people and stuff. And they're like, yeah, some alien races just don't have this. They'll just never have a Lensman, and there's just nothing they can do about it. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't see these days, because these days I'll be like, well, we haven't found one yet, but we're still looking, and we have a good feeling that we'll find someone who qualifies soon. Or they just throw away the fact of the lens requiring certain traits and say, oh no, it's just a kind of a magic luck thing that if you're a Lensman or you're not. And Doc Smith just has absolutely no time for any of that.
Yeah. It's the Eddorians show up, and they just got like the best of humanity lined up, and it's like, all right, take you, and you. And you three, you go over there. And everyone's just watching. Like they're just watching as all of the different skin colors are segregated. The Eddorians.
Yeah, it's.
And then they get to where it's just white people, and then they're like, all right, you three with the blonde hair, come with us.
Blonde hair, blue eyes. All right, there we go.
They get the blonde hair ones. They're like halfway up the ramp, and then they stop, and like one of the Eddorians just looks one dead in the eye, grabs him, and tosses him off.
Yeah, there is a feeling of that to a certain degree. It's very strange to a modern reader.
Like, the Eddorians' natural gait is a goose step.
I mean, it's funny because it's very truth, justice in the American way too. Like,
yeah.
And yet at the same time, like the characters are also like humble is maybe too strong of a word, but they're like aware that they're not necessarily, that they're aware that there are subjective aspects to this, right? Like,
yeah,
one of the Lensmen was explaining how the telepathic stuff works, and he's like, well, what's going to happen is that I'm going to send these signals to you, and you're going to hear them in your native language, even though I don't speak it, because the thoughts don't have a language. The thoughts are just thoughts, and your brain is going to translate those thoughts into your native language. And he's like, I don't speak any Dutch, or I speak like 12 words of Dutch, and you know it. And if I did try to speak those 12 words of Dutch to you, you would observe my vile American accent, right? So, like, it's not like a purely, we're good, and we're good because we're like some kind of cultural monolith. Like there is the recognition that like an American speaking Dutch might have a vile accent. So it's not like, I don't know. It's just the language, the way that things are put together is in such a way that like Smith just closes a bunch of doors, and you're like, well, those doors are closed. No modern author would ever close those doors, but Doc Smith did it.
Hey, we got stuff to write. We got to get it done. And basically, I'm an advocate for that.
I mean, it has its place. Like
it's not something you have to toss away.
Well, like doing something like that is shocking to a modern reader, and that fact alone is a reason why a modern writer might want to do it, right? I mean, you would have to suffer some slings and arrows, right? You would get lambasted on Twitter by morons. But if you did that, people would be like, "Oh, that's weird. Why did they do that?" Is there a reason for it? Or are they just, when we were talking about those rules by that what's her face Lily Orchard person, it was like, yeah. like this violates every. This takes every rule that Lily Orchard would have produced and throws it in the garbage, and then burns the garbage, and then burns the garbage again. And it's just like the kind of thing where, and it's like, I don't care what you think of me, this is the story I'm writing.
Well, that's good, because at least 10 of the rules she had were just her name-calling people, so...
Well, that's my point, right? Like that's the quote-unquote power that these people have over people, is they're like, if you write it this way, I'm going to call you this nasty name. And it's like, well, I don't care, says Doc Smith. I mean, certainly he probably didn't have to suffer any slings and arrows back in the 1950s, but at the same time, for someone to write something like that today, they would suffer slings and arrows, and they'd have to be prepared for that.
Well, he definitely didn't have to suffer them, because anyone that would have slung those arrows at him couldn't even vote, so...
I mean, I'm not sure if we're talking that far back, but sure,
yeah,
fair.
I mean, 1934 is close.
I mean, the in First Lensman, the way that the Eddorians are described is actually really cool too. Like,
oh yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, do they actually meet the Eddorians?
So they do, kind of.
Well, like the characters in the book, do they meet?
Yes, sort of. Because the Eddorians don't have physical forms anymore, and so when the prospective lensmen go down to Eresia to have the Eddorians see if they're qualified for a lens and get the measurements they need to make one for them, they all see kind of what they want to see. Like one of them sees a university, and one of them sees a jungle, and one of them sees this, and one of them sees that. And the Eddorians don't have like a physical form in like the way that we would imagine. And so they kind of just put on whatever you want to see for the lensmen who go meet them. And actually that part of First Lensman is actually pretty interesting, because you get to see a little bit more detail on what each character kind of values. It's neat, and it's very creatively done.
Utterly fantastic. Well, I am much more looking forward to reading them now, which I've got a couple books that I'm really looking forward to digging into right now, especially I discovered that there were Discworld books I didn't know existed.
Oh, really? How did that happen?
Yeah, there's apparently 5 books called The Science of Discworld, in which the wizards of Unseen University attempt to create a round world. And it sounds absolutely hilarious based on the descriptions of each book.
Well, tell me more. What are these descriptions like?
Well, like they're trying to figure out what the rules would be for a world that was round, and in one of the books, apparently the wizards get accused of using science instead of magic.
Oh, I like that.
It's pretty funny sounding. So I'm looking forward to getting my hands on those. They must have been like really late in Terry Pratchett's life. They were in an advertisement at the back of Raising Steam, which I have had on my bookshelf for years. I thought I'd read it a long time ago, because I was mistaking it for Thud. And I picked it up recently and was like, wait, I've never read this book. So I went through that one, and at the end I was surprised to see that there were some books that I wasn't aware of. So more Terry Pratchett to read. Hooray. But yeah, it's,
I mean, anytime you get your hands on some more Pratchett, that's always a good sign.
Yeah, so I've been kind of digging into going back and reading those, and I had science fiction on the mind, which was why that was a pleasant surprise. It's like, oh, how is he going to merge science fiction and fantasy? Because he hasn't, I mean, he's done that, but he hasn't really done it ever like he did with his first non-Discworld novel, which I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, his first novel that he did with the Discworld was a parody of Larry Niven's Ringworld, where these aliens came to a Discworld and were just having this funny adventure, observing all the weird things that happened on the planet.
Right.
So
interesting. Yeah, then you said there's 5 of them?
It would seem so, yeah. Maybe they're really short or something. I don't know, but yeah, 5. They're of the period of Discworld books where he was writing with other authors.
Ah, okay.
So he did those Long Earth novels with Stephen Baxter, and they're pretty good. They're kind of like a 50% Pratchett, 50% Baxter kind of feel to them. It's not like Good Omens where it feels 75% Pratchett, 25% Neil Gaiman.
Well, who did he write these science books with?
He wrote it with 2 other authors, and I'm pretty sure that they were so close to the end of his life that it's not gonna... Because, like, Raising Steam, he was already well into the Alzheimer's that he was suffering. So
yeah,
it doesn't feel as polished as a lot of his other books. And it was still
Okay.
a really good book, but he kind of threw a lot of his characters into it. You know, it almost feels as you're reading it kind of like this is the big to do at the end, the big fan service. Here's all of my characters in one book kind of thing. I mean, he's got Rincewind and Moist von Lipwig, Captain Vimes, the Patrician. I think they even mention the witches. They don't actually have them. Like you know, some of the characters are only briefly mentioned in it. Like Rincewind is in it for a second. A lot of the wizards are only in it for a couple of scenes here and there. He introduces a bunch of new characters, and it was definitely during the period after he had Alzheimer's, when he was apparently really big into playing the Elder Scrolls Oblivion.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was super into the goblins in that game for some reason, which I think I mentioned to you that I watched a video and I was like, oh, I didn't even know he played Oblivion.
I sent you that video.
Oh yeah. Oh, who was it? Oh no, I showed that video to my aunt.
Yeah.
You and my aunt, very much alike.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading that book and there's goblins all over this book. It's like, oh, this was definitely right in that I'm big into goblins kind of moment, wasn't it?
Nice.
You know, he gave them their own culture and everything. They had really cool names. The main goblin character in the story was called Of the Twilight, the Darkness, and goblins are really strict about you calling them by their full name. Yeah, so I've got that to look forward to. I've got Lensman now. I think what I'll do is I'll actually watch the anime again, and we'll put that on. We'll talk about that for a future discussion.
Oh, sure.
And
that's not a bad idea actually, because now I can, if I watch the show, the animation, I'll be able to like say, okay, this is how it's different, right?
Yeah. And I don't know how different it is. I think it was just a one-off.
There were multiple movies made, I'm pretty sure.
I only ever remember an advertisement for one, and I am only slightly sure that I even saw it because I always got it confused with another show called SPT Leisner, which I have seen all of, at least all of that came to America. It was like, I guess there were 45 episodes and we only ever got 9 for some reason.
That was pretty common back in the day.
Yeah, but I'm not sure about that one. I vaguely remember something about how the film reels were destroyed or something. It's like not easy to find for some reason. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. But
yeah,
it's that might be another one to talk about at some point though, because I remember that show being very good, and I was really disappointed that I couldn't find the rest of it.
Well, it's probably easy to find nowadays.
It might be. It was pretty recent. It was probably 10 years ago that I was looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can do another Lensman after you finish up reading the books. I'll read the books and go through the show, and we can dissect the rest of it from there.
Yeah, I don't know. They're really fun. They're kind of designed to be fun.
And people need to be pointed to good science fiction because apparently nobody wants to write it anymore.
Well, it's good old science fiction too. And it's like I mean, I wouldn't say that it's good science fiction, right? Like, I would say that it's a good adventure story, but it's not, like, for the science fiction perspective, it's very floppy.
Well, it's definitely more pulpy than science fiction, but it's my kind of science fiction because I always lean more towards just it is science fiction, like kind of like not fantasy science fiction, but like just people musing about what the future might hold science fiction as opposed to hard science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's. I feel like to me there's some kind of a distinction between science fiction and adventures in space. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is. I mean, it's like you always said, where like Doctor Who is more like science fantasy than science fiction.
Right. I mean, they are really. I mean, okay. So the thing about it, right, is that Doc Smith was a chemical engineer, and so he brings in a lot of like his understanding of like manufacturing and stuff into the book. Like the book I'm reading right now, he keeps talking about bus bars. it's like only because I was working in a laboratory where we were putting up power supplies for various things. Do I know what a bus bar is? It's like just for the audience.
It's the little bar with the screws that you can put multiple wires in, right?
No, kind of. I mean, kind of.
I mean, that is a bus bar, right?
Well, no, but like a bus bar is a bar is a bar mounted to the ceiling usually, and it is basically an open bar that is partially enclosed, and on that bar are 3 more bars that or it could be more than 3 bars, but there's basically a thick metal contact that is extended in space for say 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, something like that. That carries, one phase of however many phases you want for your power supply. And so when I was working in that lab, we had we were setting up bus bars where, there would be 120 volts at 0 degrees, 120 volts at, 60 degrees, 120 volts at 180 degrees, 120 volts at 270 degrees, and a ground bar. And these things were like nightmarish in the sense that like it's basically a square inch conductor of metal, and so we can basically push as much current as you want. and they're only partly enclosed, so like you're just sitting in this room, and that above you there's this big thing that has just a big old chunk of metal that is energized to 120 or 180 or 240 volts, and God forbid you touch it. Because you will be.
He won't forbid it, but you'll regret it.
Yeah, exactly. You will be running a couple hundred amperes through yourself if you happen to do so, and it will not be. You're going to have a bad time.
God might not forbid it, but if you want to say hi to him at any time, just reach out and ET phone home on that one.
But we had to move because what you did with these bus bars is you had these boxes, and these boxes you would hook up to the bus bars, and you would turn a switch, like a big honking mechanical switch, and like that would connect a contact that would basically mechanically turn contacts in the box so that they make contact with the bus bars in the bus bar array thing. And so like I don't know, there was something about like just like having my hand on this thing that I'm mechanically turning this big old piece of copper to touch another big old piece of copper so that I can get power down to my experiment. And just the sheer amount of current that they could run if you really wanted to. And then there was this one piece that we had. I don't know why it was in the lab or where it came from or what it was, but it looked like it was supposed to hook up to the bus bar, but it was basically just 2 solid pieces of metal with a lever that you could turn. And so it was basically like a device that if you hooked it up, it would just short the bus bars to themselves and just like metallically fuse everything in the room. and I don't know why we had it, but it was there, and it was one of those things that it was just on a table, and it's like, why do we still have that? What is that for? I mean, if you use it to do the thing that it looks like it's supposed to do, you're just going to electrocute yourself and ruin everything. Why is this an object that we have?
It's the death bar.
Yeah. And so, like, it's just fun to watch all of this like knowledge that this guy that Doc Smith had from manufacturing go into his stories, because he's talking about chemicals and bus bars and all this fun jargon that just kind of gives the story a very unique flavor, because you just don't see, because it's like bus bar I think is literally like one of those trademarks that becomes a non-trademark by evidence that everyone is using it to mean the same thing. Like Kleenex, right? Like Kleenex is a trademark, technically. But if I buy non-Kleenex brand tissues, people will call them Kleenexes. And bus bars are like that. Like, Bus is a company, and they make fuses and stuff like that. And so I think they designed the first bus bar. But even by Doc Smith's time, bus bar was just a generic statement about, like, here's a thing, like, it's just a thing that is designed specifically to transfer huge freaking amounts of power, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's actually kind of driving me crazy because I've been calling those things. You've got the little bars that have the that you mount on things, and they have screws that you can run different copper wire from, and those are buses. I thought that's what a bus bar was.
I mean, you can I guess I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but it sounds like you're talking about more of like a
serial bus on a or a what do they call them in PCs?
Oh, I mean, those are like super low current versions of the same thing, kind of, sort of. But like, no, I mean, like,
so that's a different thing than what you were talking. I mean, I get what you were talking about. You could drive by a substation.
Real bus bar is a monstrosity thing that you're a little bit scared of. It's the kind of thing that hangs above your head inside the laboratory, and you're you know how you sometimes like look at a thing and you're like, man, I certainly hope I don't touch that by accident. And you're like, there's no reason why I would accidentally touch that, but like if I did, I know it would be really bad. But at the same time, there's an image in your head of you like, ooh, I should touch this.
This is where we put the bad kids to play.
Yeah.
No, I'm imagining that picture of I think it's Tesla that's sitting around that's one of them the
Tesla coils?
Yeah, the Tesla coil where it's like sparking all around him.
Yeah.
And I'm picturing him sitting next to one of those, and he just kind of looks up and moves his chair back a bit.
Yeah. It's fun. They're fun stories.
I should let my dog play with one of those.
Yeah, probably not. If she's going to eat a bunch of chocolate, she won't have fun with a bus bar.
What would you do for a bus bar?
Not be electrocuted, I hope.
Man, I hope those buildings are secure. I'm just picturing squirrels getting fried left and right.
No, I mean, like I said, they're partially enclosed, so like the way that they work is that you get a box.
Wait, just so I have the right image in my head. These are the same things that are like at the substations for stepping up and down transformers, right? I'm not like thinking of the wrong thing here.
I don't know. I mean, these were a very specific thing that I used that were in my laboratory, and so like there's probably a lot of different things that, but it's basically imagine a bar like imagine a steel I-beam, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not an I-beam, but like imagine like a steel extrusion, right? And say it's like 1 inch by 4 inches, right? Now hollow it out so that it's like a C shape instead.
Okay.
And then inside that C shape, you split it into the 3 or 4 different bits that you need, and you insulate them from each other. So now you basically have like a C shape that is grounded, and then you have 3 or 4 really big honkin' thick conductors inside that are just there. Like there's no like cover over them or anything. If you wanted to, you could climb up to a bus bar and you could stick your finger in through the slot in the bottom, and you would have a lot of fun. but like no, what you do is you take these boxes, and these boxes on the top of them, they just have a thing that sticks out of them with 3 prongs, and you just basically jam the box up into the bus bar, and then you turn the box and it wedges itself into place, and it makes the correct contacts. But like if you didn't push it in all the way, you could short things or something. It's just really scary like to work with.
I actually had a much scarier view of it in my head until you described it that time. I was picturing these 4 bars that were much further apart, and I'm picturing you rotating this giant turning wheel with a copper bar on the end, and I'm trying to picture it like, why would you do that to get the different phases out of the
right.
And it's just then you describe the smaller ones like, oh, that makes a lot more sense.
Well, I mean, the thing is that it's partially enclosed is the part that gets to me. Because, like, now, like, everything these days is like, oh, it's got a cover on it so that you don't hurt yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, you can't find an object somewhere that doesn't have a safety cover on it, right? But these are just like, yeah, if you wanted, you could stick your finger in there. Just don't do it.
Here be dragons.
Here be, 200 amperes of 120 volts. Enjoy.
You ever hit a fly with one of them electrified fly swatters? Yeah, that's going to be you.
Well, yeah, pretty much. There's
Pop,
just
pop,
so much.
Rudy's
There's just
done.
so much of that, like really, really really blunt. Like everything is a sledgehammer in Lensman, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
I got some time. I got some reading I can get done. Got a whole bunch of stuff I can do, and I think Lensman is going to have to be one of them. They weren't particularly long books either, so.
No, they're not. I mean, I would say that they're probably 2-hour reads each book, maybe less.
Which is significantly shorter than Umineko, which we also have to go through.
Yes, we do. But no, they're not long. I mean, the 6-book series thing that I bought is long, but like that's because it contains 6 full novels.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, they don't waste your time. You get right in, you get into the action. They tell you what you need to know, and all of a sudden you're hop skipping across the universe with these guys trying to solve a crime or defeat giant like crime syndicate kind of thing. It's just fun action adventure with a lot of science fiction-y kind of stuff, but also at the same time not that kind of like attention to detail that sometimes makes science fiction really like sloggy, like a slog. Like it's diametrically opposed to like H.P. Lovecraft's more science fiction-y stuff.
Yeah, which a lot of the pulp fiction at that time kind of was.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the difference between weird tales and adventure stories, you know?
Yeah.
Like weird tales is about like getting into the details and really making you like be terrified that this thing might, exist somewhere in the universe. Whereas this is just like, let's just have some fun and shoot some ray guns and have some big rockets and something's going to explode. And maybe someday we'll figure out what these Arisians are trying to do.
All right, so there you go. Go read yourself some Lensman.
Yes.
Enjoy.
Indeed. I mean, I guess that's an episode?
I think it is. I think.
All right.
I think we did well there.
You're at approximately 1 hour and 5 minutes on your recording. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I like how you ask me that now. It happened one time.
I know, but it's just it's a funny thing to
very
ask.
funny. It's very funny that recording exists, and it's like, oh yeah, we're only at like 45 minutes. You're like, no,
no, we're not.
We are not.
All right. Well, I guess we'll call it for this week then. So, as always, this has been the Wordy Pair Podcast. I'm Rudy,
and I'm Justin,
and we'll come up with something else fun to talk about next week. See you later.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.